This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and thank you for joining us on Global Business. I am Peninah Karibe. We begin with a look at the markets. The JSE closed lower today, tracking global markets as traders await any further signs regarding the trajectory of U.S. monetary policy, placing pressure on global risk assets. The JSE all-share fell 1.34% to 56,959.47 points, and the top 40 1.43%, with the former reaching its lowest level in a month during the course of the day. Coming up on the show tonight, South Sudan's government spending increases by a whopping 155%. Kenya's capital markets regulator talks tough on falling governance levels. And crude prices surge thanks to OPEC cartel deal on extension of production cuts. We begin in South Sudan. The Finance Minister Salvatore Garang Mabiudit has announced a whopping 155% rise in spending for the 2019-2020 fiscal year to be partly funded by increased oil revenues. South Sudan's Finance Minister made this announcement in his second attempt to present a draft budget in Parliament. Mabiudit told Parliament the 2019-2020 budget will increase to $1.6 billion, up from 2018-2019's approved $620 million with a deficit of $590 million. In May, the International Monetary Fund said South Sudan's fiscal stance that relied on huge spending cuts was unsustainable. It had paralyzed government services and led to accumulation of arrears, including on wages. In Egypt, Parliament's Industry Committee has urged the cabinet of Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli not to sell the Eastern Tobacco Company. The committee, led by MP Faraj Yamer, said the state-owned company serves the strategic interests of the Egyptian economy. The statement came after 3 MPs submitted 3 briefing requests amid reports that the government intends to sell more shares in the Eastern Tobacco Company in the coming days. The government recently implemented a program to sell stakes in publicly owned Egyptian companies. The program started by offering 4.5% of Eastern Tobacco Company's shares on the stock market. Let's go live to Cairo, where Yasser Kim is following these developments for us. So Yasser, the Parliamentary Industry Committee is urging government not to sell the Eastern Tobacco Company. What arguments are these MPs presenting?
Well, basically, the Eastern Tobacco Company is one of the high profitable companies, non-oil producers that have been doing well. It does not just produce Egyptian cigarettes brand, which is the highest selling brand in Egypt locally. It's called the Cleopatra brand because it's a cheap one for most Egyptians. But it also is the only one that has the license for other brands to produce in Egypt. So the foreign brands such as Marlboro, Kent, and so forth, if they want to produce in Egypt, they can only do so in the plant of the Eastern Company lines. So actually, it's a monopoly of the tobacco industry in Egypt in one company. So it's highly profitable, around $500 million a year. The revenue is about $4 billion. It pays taxes, it exports, and it also is employing thousands of workers. So the MPs are saying, why give it all up and give it to an investor, a private investor who's probably not Egyptian, and will probably make some changes, maybe restructure the company in a way that will not be good for the Egyptian workers or so forth, and that the income, most of the income will go to the private sector rather than go to the government. And that's why the MPs are trying to block any sale of the company, saying that 4.5% that has been sold already in a previous IPO is enough, and not to give up the majority stake of the company from the government to the private sector.
So are there any indications, Yasser, that government will heed the calls of the MPs even after offering 4.5% of Eastern Tobacco shares on the stock market?
Well, the government has not responded yet, and I think the government is trying not to get involved too much in this issue, even when it has announced the list of companies that it will be listing in the IPO probably in the third or fourth quarter of this year, still to be decided. The Eastern company was not mentioned as per se one of the companies on the list. There are about 3 new IPOs, newly listed public companies to be floated in the stock exchange, and about 8 that have been before and will submit more, will be having more shares sold out of their stake. Now, is Eastern Company one of those 8? Still remains to be seen, but the government is trying to back away or not really talk much about Eastern Company at the moment, and is speaking about other companies that it plans to put into the stock market soon.
Now, the government's reform plan, which includes selling stake in state-owned enterprises, was backed by the IMF. So how will this play to its relations with a global lender if indeed it backs off from selling the shares?
Now, obviously, this is one of the main conditions that have been proposed by the IMF for the loan, the $12 billion loan that has been given, and the economic reform program. It's good not just for the companies, not just for the government, but also for the stock market. The stock market needs new companies to be listed, profitable ones, to energize the market. The market has slowed down in the last year, and it needs such push or such pumping of new stocks and new shares that would attract investors back to the Egyptian stock exchange. So it is important for the stock exchange. However, the government sees that it has already been planning at least 11 companies, 3 new ones and 8 ones that have been before, like I said, and I think it will not really harm the relations with the IMF if one company like Eastern is not involved like before. But there are others. There are another 10 that are ready to be listed. So it will not really damage the relationship as long as the IPOs go ahead, and it will not be cancelled completely. But when it's probably in September or something that we'll be knowing even more details and which companies will be there that we expect to be listed in the IPO. So I don't expect that this one company, Eastern Company, would damage the relationship between the government and the IMF.
All right, Yasser, thank you for that update. Yasser Hakim, live in Cairo. Now, the African Development Bank estimates that governments across the continent need to invest at least $68 billion to $108 billion a year in roads, ports, and more. CGTN's Ramanyang explored how a lack of seamless logistics and protectionism in agriculture are impediments to the CFTA with the president of the African Development Bank.
So a number of things obviously still has to be done. First and foremost is we have to continue to work to close Africa's massive infrastructure gap. You know, you can only trade if you're able to get from one place to the other. And so Africa still has a massive deficit of about, $68 to $108 billion in terms of infrastructure financing gap per year. But a lot is being done. We are working a lot in making sure that we can connect the landlocked countries, of which we have roughly about 18 of those out of the 54 countries are landlocked countries. Investing in ports, investing in rail, investing in airports, investing in ICT infrastructure to allow connectivity, and also to be able to do outsourcing of services. So these are areas that are continuing to be areas that we have been investing in as African Development Bank. We didn't have to wait until there was a signing of a CFTA. We've been doing a lot of this, as a bank for quite a long time. In fact, in the last 10 years, we've invested well over $14 billion. Just on regional integration infrastructure. So we will continue to do that. So I think that for me, what's really important is where there is a will, everything can happen. And so having that will, having that commitment, and having a focus to drive forward, I think is the most critical component of what has come out of this signing of the CFTA.
Do you see a future where regions, at least, can have common sanitary and phytosanitary standards? at the very least, as a starting point towards essentially making sure that, say, milk powder from Kenya can get all the way to Nigeria in a very seamless manner?
Well, absolutely. You know, trade is all about standardization. You know, if you sell me a product and you're selling another person a product, those products have to be the same. So I think being able to have quality assurance and standards and harmonization is the key to being able to do trade. If you take the case of agriculture that you mentioned, yes, obviously everybody protects their agricultural sector. Well, Europeans do it, the Americans do it, China does it, Japan does it. Everybody protects their agricultural sector. So there is no doubt in my mind that the sector will need to continue to have a lot of support from governments to support smallholder farmers, to have access to technologies, to have access to finance, to be able to connect to markets. Those are things that you have to do. But beyond that, I don't think that Africa will go far by just simply, saying, well, we're going to just block ourselves from trade with the rest of the world. No, what we've got to do is to make sure we increase productivity, to make sure we're fixing our infrastructure deficits that make us not as competitive as we could be, to make sure that we can have just what you said about grades and standards, and commodities can move from place to place, knowing fully well that is a standard thing that's actually there. So that's where the bank, the African Development Bank, we've been supporting quite a lot of work in making sure that we can harmonize standards, because the standards are going to be very, very important.
Some corporate news now. U.S. food giant Starbucks has denied reports of its plans to venture into the Kenyan market. Contrary to speculation in local media, the U.S. firm was expected to open a research and support center here in Kenya in 2009, but shelved the plans and shifted attention to Rwanda. Starbucks at the time said it changed its plans due to a tough operating environment in Kenya. Telecoms giant Airtel Africa has listed shares of its Nigerian subsidiary on the local bourse. The listing is Nigeria's third largest after the initial public offerings of Dangote Cement and MTN Nigeria. The firm's chief executive officer, Ragunath Mandava, said that the successful Nigerian listing makes the operator the first telco to simultaneously list on the premium segment of the London and Nigerian stock exchanges through an IPO. South African telecom firm MTN has partnered with financial services group Sanlam as part of the network operator's efforts to grow its financial services operations. The South African unit said the partnership would initially allow its customers to access the insurer's funeral cover and various life products with unique extra benefits. Customers will be able to sign up for Sanlam's products via devices linked to MTN's network. And Richard Branson's space tourism venture Virgin Galactic plans to go public as part of a deal with a special purpose acquisition company. The company was reportedly created by Social Capital LP Chief Executive Officer Chamath Palihapitiya. The deal was reported by the Wall Street Journal, which said the SPAC, which is the Social Capital Hydrosophia Holdings Corporation, will invest about $800 million for a 49% stake in Virgin Galactic. And that's a look at your corporate headlines. You're watching Global Business. Still ahead. Kenya's capital markets regulator talks tough on falling governance levels. And after more than 8 years in the making, a carbon tax on South African businesses takes effect.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Data out of the country. The country's foreign currency reserves.
With a dedicated and diverse team of anchors, CGTN now brings Africa to the palm of your hand.
I'm Peninah Karibe in the heart of Nairobi, which is bustling.
From everyday heroes to the continent's most powerful figures, we bring their voices to you.
We haven't changed. And this is something most of us are very excited about.
We bring you news that's changing perspectives.
from Nairobi City Center.
News that brings Africa to the world. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Kenya's Capital Markets Authority says it will investigate and take action against rogue persons and firms with less court injunctions. The firm has been empowered by the Treasury in efforts to enhance penalties and sanctions in the market. CMA recently won a court battle against directors of Imperial Bank, allowing the investigation into a $19.5 million bond issued by the lender before sinking into receivership. Various court injunctions have been filed in court challenging the powers held by the firm in investigating and fining. This has led to a stall in several cases as investors' confidence drops. This week, it penalized and sanctioned renowned stockbrokers for insider trading. Ex-Castrol CEO Andre De Simon and Ali Khan Sachi were found guilty of insider trading involving shares of a leading oil marketer, Colonel Kobil. Let's get more insights from Vincent Kemosabe, strategy, policy and governance expert in studio with us. Vincent, thank you for joining us tonight. So just how rampant is this problem of insider trading, and what are the challenges authorities have come up against in dealing with it?
I think the decision that the authority, that the capital markets took, is a very clear testament that this is a problem. Now, for us to appreciate the impact and the magnitude, we also have to appreciate that this is a space that is constricted. Not more than 1,000 actors participate in the stock market. So the veracity of the impact of it can only be contextualized by the number of actors. I would say that based on the commitment, the way the authority went to court seeking the judgment that they got at the Court of Appeal tells you clearly that it's a problem. The authority and even the government has been speaking strongly about this. There is a problem that its magnitude could be bigger than what we would actually be guesstimate or give a guess. Yeah,
so this investigation has been termed a first in the NSE's history.
Yes.
Obviously, it's a heart in CMA's, it's a feather on CMA's heart. Yes. But would you say the regulator has the powers and even the structure to deal with these kinds of challenges or problems?
Remember, I would say that I would actually celebrate and say kudos to CMA. I was talking to insiders within the National Treasury and actually comparing the regulators, and CMA ranks highly among one of the most effective regulators within the market. So we celebrate the achievement. It sends the right message to the market, because when you start seeing such punishment being done, this is not the first one. We had a problem at the National Bank where some of the directors also, they were actually punished by the authority. So I would say that that is a good way of sending a clear message that the regulator is present, people's investments are taken care of, and you have a responsible entity. So I think it's something well celebrating. But now the challenge is in terms of the magnitude and the capacity of the authority, more needs to be done so that we can get to the where we have the Western capitals, the SEC in the US, where they are very, very keen and thorough when it comes to such and punishing. Because remember, the market collapsed in 2008 because of some of these practices. The Lehman Brothers, as in it brought down an entire country because there was laxity on the part of the regulatory body. So this is a plus for me, good for the African continent, even for us to learn from it, so that actually we support CMA as it's through more budgetary allocation and also training and building the right expertise to actually nab some of these things. Look at Imperial. 3 days before the collapse of the bank, they issue out a bond, yet they were very aware of the problems. And they go to court to actually stop investigations. So that tells you that you have people who are outrightly ready to break the rules, but also ready to abuse the court processes so that they are not held into account.
All right, and so we're hearing some of these suspects saying they're going to court to appeal the CMA ban.
Yes.
What would such a process entail?
Of course, I would say they still reserve the right constitutionally. If any decisions, the courts are the final arbiters, so it is their constitutional rights to appeal. But it is important to appreciate the sign and the signal that CMA has sent to the market. So irrespective of what decision that the court will take, the time it will take, it is important that the court has already also sent the right signal by the Court of Appeal revising or an earlier decision that actually questioned the powers, the investigative powers of CMA. So I would say that it's okay, let them appeal, take their constitutional right. But appeal to Treasury and the National Assembly to add more resources into the CMA so that it can be the custodian of people's investments and resources.
Okay, so of course this brings to four elements of poor governance, especially in the private sector.
Yes.
How can this best be corrected?
We have to, when you have some of these bodies, like for example, people who are stockbrokers, people who are investment advisors, who actually operate on their own without oversight, yet their decisions have a lot of impact and ramification. So it calls upon the importance of strengthening corporate governance in the private sector, ensure that such institutions have boards. You have people like Alican, who was found culpable to be responding to a board. And even built from other Western experiences where you have two types of boards, where you have a board that oversights management and the day-to-day. Then you have others that exclusively look into governance issues, like has happened. We'll see this in the German models. So governance is a major issue in the private sector, that you cannot just be licensed and operate freely without having proper accountability, both statutory and also corporately.
All right.
Yes.
Vincent Kemosabe in studio with us. Thank you.
You're welcome.
After more than 8 years in the making, a carbon tax on South African businesses came into effect in June. The tax is part of a commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as defined by the Paris Agreement on climate change. On the other hand, the country's economy is still stagnating, and any carbon tax contributions to national treasury are going to be muted until the economy begins to show meaningful growth. Angela Coppola has more.
The current introductory tax per tonne is seen as being too low by global standards. Tax authorities say this will be adapted if targets are met or not met.
The rate is highly likely to be to go up and get to the right price by giving a few years. And remember, it's not just these 3 years. We've started this about 8 years ago, if not more, and we've given companies the opportunity to shift towards cleaner technologies as they've needed to reinvest and buy new machinery and so on. And we hope that they've made the right choices, even if in a short term it proved to be a bit more expensive.
To minimize the initial impact of the tax, the authorities have introduced 7 allowances and a basic tax-free allowance for businesses involved in emitting greenhouse gases.
Essentially what that does is it would allow the entity to reduce its tax liability associated with that activity up to 95%. With the basic tax-free being 60%. So you're only looking at paying your tax on 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions in your taxable year.
Companies emitting those gases are obliged to register and provide detailed information to the Department of Environment, Fisheries and Forestry, who share that information with the tax authorities.
And SARS will use this base in order to verify whatever has been submitted by a taxpayer. Now, the people that need to register are anybody that's in the industry that is listed in the Carbon Tax Act, where the emissions actually go over the threshold that is actually allowed.
Some industry sectors may not be as resilient as National Treasury suggests, especially when the tax allowances are reviewed and possibly removed.
If that is going to be taken away and carbon tax is going to increase by 2%, CPI plus 2% every year, if those allowances fall away when they review it, it could literally mean the closure of our business. And that in effect will mean 400 people losing their jobs.
The carbon tax that's just been introduced is seen as changing behaviour, and if people start using it to arbitrage tax benefits, then it's defeating the whole object of the exercise. I'm Angelo Coppola for CG10 in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Cape Town is set for new development as it approves a $1.5 billion budget, granting the go-ahead on the building plans. Out of 10,341 applications for land development, almost 9,000 have been approved by the city. The city aims to intensify land use and optimize land value in regard to spatial development. Cape Town has a historically unique combination of culture, infrastructure, design, innovation, and creativity that it aims to retain as it seeks to boost urbanization. The city also serves as a tourist destination, catering to a biodiverse population. We spoke to Maria Newood, a mayoral committee member for Spatial Planning and Environment, to find out what is in store.
The city's aim with our spatial development is that we really want to intensify land use so that you optimize the value from your land. So it will include all the categories of land use: commercial, residential and industrial building plans that's been approved. And the land use will be applications around rezonings, in other words, altering the use of the land or extend the use of the land. For instance, a single residential land use will be rezoned to a group housing, which will then have more houses on the same piece of land, or to, especially alongside our My City routes, we're aiming for a mixed-use development, which will usually include a commercial site plus a residential site. And those applications were 10,341, of which we've approved 8,929 approvals.
In the meantime, Johannesburg, the economic hub of South Africa, has set plans in motion to become one of the first fully integrated smart cities on the continent by 2040. Smart cities are highly integrated with seamless services, enabling residents to go about their daily lives without too much bother. CGTN's Julie Shire takes a look.
Johannesburg, positioned as a world-class African city, is home to nearly 4.5 million people. It has the highest number of migrants and millionaires and some of the poorest communities, presenting vast challenges as it switches to a digital city in the next 20 years.
We've got a number of projects that are currently running, which involves health, which involves public safety, which involves high-speed Wi-Fi, and all these projects are aimed at getting us to the level where we can be rated as one of the smart cities around Africa.
Beyond demand for services, residents are faced with high levels of unemployment, crime, traffic congestion, and a public transport system which is still far from seamless.
We must have an e-ticketing system that can be able to be used for both Rea Vaya and Metro Bus without any problems. And if needs be, we're going to work very closely with the provincial government to see how we can be able to integrate the trains into the Smart City program that we are busy implementing in the city.
But there's no blueprint for cities of the future. It depends on population needs, universal access to 5G network, accurate data collection, and a skilled workforce.
So all baby steps maybe, but trying to build up the skill set that people can find a decent job, and then work with industry to offer those jobs to them. So it's a long game. It's not like tomorrow is going to happen. So you'll find your own way.
Now we already live a smart life with our high-tech phones, watches, and sophisticated cars. I get into my vehicle, it chooses the best route for me, and off I go. Smart cities will work on a much larger scale, making life easier for everyone. It will even tell you where to park when you go to the shops. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And this is Global Business coming up after the break. Crude prices surge thanks to OPEC cartel deal on extension of production cuts. And Iranian tech firms flourish despite U.S. sanctions.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sudan. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
A look at some of the day's top stories now. Nigeria's National Assembly was on lockdown Tuesday afternoon after shots were fired outside during clashes between police and a group of Shiite Muslim protesters. State news channel NTA says the protesters, representing Nigeria's minority Shiite Muslims, had tried to enter the complex, sparking the confrontation with police. They were calling for the release of their leader, Ibrahim Zazaki, who has been in detention since 2015. 47 migrants rescued from a boat in the Mediterranean have been taken to a port in southern Sicily's Pozzallo. The migrants were rescued by the Italian Coast Guard. They were said to have come from Cote d'Ivoire, Tunisia and Morocco. According to Pozzallo port doctor Vincenzo Morello, the migrants were part of a group of 53 people, with 6 migrants requiring immediate medical care taken to Lampedusa. African women entrepreneurs from Mali, Burkina Faso, Cote d'Ivoire, Niger, Senegal and other countries have met in Tunis for the African Women Meetup Congress. They highlighted African women's roles in economic development and created an African business generating network. Participants stressed that women should also be recognized as the pillars of many successful African businesses. And escalating intercommunal violence in central Mali has made makeshift shelters mushroom as an unprecedented number of people set up camps in the capital, Bamako. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs says more than 120,000 people have now been displaced, with 60% of them staying in camps. And that's a look at some of the day's top stories. Oil prices approached $65 a barrel on Tuesday. That came as OPEC production cuts and Middle East tensions outweighed the U.S.-China trade dispute that's been dampening the global economy and demand for oil. OPEC and its allies agreed last week to extend their supply-cutting deal until next March. Benchmark Brent crude prices have risen almost 20% this year, supported by the agreement and tensions in the Middle East, including the dispute concerning Iran's nuclear program. Brent rose 59 cents to $64.70 a barrel by 10:33 GMT US, while West Texas Intermediate crude was up 46 cents to $58.12. Turning to technology, and companies ranging from startups to smartphone makers are managing to survive and even flourish in Iran despite harsh American sanctions. Thanks to Cafe Bazaar, our correspondent Hussein Nemazadeh has the story from Tehran.
There are more than 64 million mobile internet users in the Islamic Republic of Iran, a country of 80 million people. Smartphone ownership has skyrocketed while the country's internet penetration rate has reached over 90%. Usage of the mobile internet has risen in Iran along with the growth of social media and startups. Iranian tech entrepreneurs have learned to live with and develop under the US sanctions.
Apple and Google have removed popular Iranian apps from Apple and Google stores. Access to some American social media apps is also restricted here. But locally established Android and iOS markets have filled this void. Cafe Bazaar, an Iranian giant Android market, emerged and developed amid and due to the US sanctions.
Cafe Bazaar was launched about eight years ago, and when Google Play stopped its services for Iranian users, a team of students and graduates of Sharif University of Technology started working on an application called Bazaar, which means market or marketplace.
Cafe Bazaar was launched in 2011. It is now the most popular app store among Iranians. It offers apps one can see in Google Play and local apps as well, making room for Iranian startups and app developers to launch their products in their homeland.
Google Play actually wasn't available in Iran. You have a lot of Iranian people looking to the international marketplace for applications and technology for their daily lives. You have a lot of developers in Iran who are trying to produce applications and games. Both groups are having trouble dealing with the international marketplace and what happens is we end up creating this bridge between those two communities, and things really take off from there.
Cafe Bazaar now has 40 million users. There are over 180,000 apps available in Cafe Bazaar's platform, covering a wide range of categories. The value of the company is estimated to be at 380 million euros. Cafe Bazaar is increasingly looking toward games to drive future revenue, as Iran has an estimated 25 million gamers.
Cafe Bazaar is planning to expand its business with international game developing companies. We can help them to localize their apps and games in Iran for Iranian users.
We're going to be going to China Joy in August, which is going to be a great opportunity for us to directly engage with those game developers. So it's going to be a really good opportunity to see what we can do in terms of expanding the cooperation we already have with Chinese developers.
Talented young Iranians haven't let the US keep their country from enjoying the global trends in business and technology. The absence of US tech giants such as Amazon, Google Play, and Uber have allowed their Iranian equivalents to grow rapidly thanks to 3G and 4G technology, with 5G on the way. Hossein Nematzadeh, CGTN, Tehran.
As the trade war continues, consumers and businesses are facing extra costs from tariffs in a broad range of categories, from produce to furniture. Tech companies are also taking a hit by higher prices for many components from China. But trade tensions may also be having an even greater impact on those companies by hampering their ability to fill important jobs. CGTN's Mark New has more.
At universities across the United States, tens of thousands of Chinese students come to study engineering and technology, with hopes of someday finding a job here.
Yes, I want to work here. It's less pressure than China, and also the salary is very high, but I don't know if I can.
When we look at the number of students who are able to find those positions working in companies who are able to receive the work permits they need, we're seeing a decrease in that. We're also seeing an increase in the number of rejections.
One of the hardest hit sectors is semiconductors. According to the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, China imports nearly $300 billion worth of computer chips from U.S. companies annually. Under U.S. rules, foreign nationals, including Chinese, must get special licenses in order to work on sensitive technologies like semiconductors. From 2013 to 2017, Chinese nationals accounted for more than 60% of the approved licenses. But Laurel Munoz says, while it used to take a couple of weeks to get approved, it's now averaging about 6 to 8 months.
It's making it more difficult for companies to get the work they need right away. It's also making the United States and Silicon Valley in particular less attractive as a destination for some of the smartest, most skilled workers from around the world.
The engineer has gotten a visa, they're working for a company, but then the company tries to assign them to a particular project and they can't get onto it because the license is being held up.
Gwenapp says while companies lose out on skilled workers, the region could also lose out on job creation from potential Chinese founders.
Some of them end up starting companies and have had a big impact on Silicon Valley. Weili Dai, who was born in Shanghai, is one of the co-founders of Marvell, which is a large chip company now with over 5,000 employees. Ken Shi, who has founded several companies, including Fortinet, which is one of the largest cybersecurity companies in Silicon Valley, 5,000 employees.
Leroy Munoz says the Trump administration also views access to sensitive technologies as a threat.
They view the situation as, if we don't assert technological dominance now, we risk falling behind China, and the fear on the part of the administration is that that threat also is not only a technology threat, but possibly also a national security threat when we look at issues around artificial intelligence and cybersecurity.
Leroy Munoz's Silicon Valley Leadership Group has more than 350 members, including top chip makers such as Intel and Samsung Semiconductor. He says while members understand the security concerns, they also want the Trump administration to realize the risks and costs of losing out on long-term innovation. Mark New, CGTN, Mountain View, California.
The world's tourist spots are gearing up to greet more free-spending Chinese visitors this summer. That's because the Chinese government has just made the process of obtaining a passport easier and more affordable. And now it's also a popular season for overseas travel this summer vacation. Shuxin Chen has more.
Starting this month, the fee for obtaining a Chinese passport has been reduced by 25%, something which has gone down well with the public.
The fee reduction can certainly encourage those who want to go away one day to get a passport now. Those who are still thinking about it and have not acted on it may choose to apply for a passport after the reduction.
While authorities around the country have been reporting a noticeable increase this month, it's been a trend in the southwestern Chinese city of Chengdu for quite some time.
People can now apply for a passport across China instead of going back to their registered permanent residence. It saves time and cost. We processed 570,000 passports in 2017, and in 2018, the number went up to 690,000.
That equals to a 20% increase, and it's only expected to rise further through the new measure. Nevertheless, data shows that only 1/10 of China's population hold a passport, meaning the rest probably have never left the country. Yet, this relatively small proportion still spent more than $100 billion overseas last year, more than any other country. China's largest online travel service, Ctrip, said that the heavy spending Chinese travelers are welcomed all over the world.
Many countries look forward to seeing Chinese travelers. Tourism is one of the greenest and most convenient ways to achieve economic growth.
And the company is very optimistic that more Chinese people will be applying for passports and planning trips to overseas.
As Chinese people's incomes continue to increase, the remaining 90% of China's population could all be potential customers for international travel. Now, many post-80s Chinese have a family with young children and retired elderlies. With the passport fee reduction and easier access to obtain one, more families will choose to travel overseas, taking children and elderlies along.
Lu added that most Chinese travelers are still eyeing popular destinations and are looking out for promotions and advertising. As more Chinese cities start to offer international routes and increase passport service capabilities, some predict there could be some 240 million Chinese passport holders by next year, doubling today's number, all pointing to a massive expansion in Chinese global exploration. Xu Xingchen, CGTN, Chengdu.
China's cosmetics market surpassed 262 billion yuan in sales volume last year, and cosmetics producers are looking to do even better this year with the help of plant-based products. Chen Tong takes a closer look.
Skincare brand InnoHerb is one of the domestic companies that uses only plants as the major ingredients of its products. Sales have bloomed in recent years. The sales volume of its most popular product, Rhodiola rosea serum, grew 10 times in 2018 compared to the previous year. The company says it has a very special crop of customers.
Our consumers have a higher educational level, and they have higher demands for effective products. They are aware of their skin conditions and know what problems they need to solve.
InnoHerb is far from the only skincare brand that are using natural plant products to attract consumers. Smaller-sized Dr. Plant has been flourishing, and now has over 3,000 stores in 300 cities. Then there's Lin Qingxuan, which has sold over 380,000 bottles of camellia oil in the past year. It turns out Chinese consumers are very conscious about the ingredients in what they put on their skin.
I focus on the effects and the ingredients to make sure I won't have an allergic reaction.
My skin is oily and I have acne, so I focus more on oil control and moisturizing ingredients. I think pure nature is better.
Data from research company Cartel Water Panel show that over 16% of Chinese consumers spending on skincare products goes to plant-based products.
The shopping basket Chinese consumers hold is becoming larger, but these baskets don't necessarily just contain more high-end products, but rather more diverse products. Botanical skincare products are an easy addition to the baskets.
Domestic brands now dominating the botanical skincare shelves, with 2/3 of the products on the sale coming from Chinese firms. But experts point out that foreign brands are finding a place in the garden. Cartel Water Panel data show the sales value of botanical products from Japanese and European skincare sprouted at over 50% year-on-year from April 2018 to March 2019.
Japanese brands and Europe and US brands have many effective products. For example, they use ingredients like basil and mushroom to tackle problems of acne, and that is impacting the performance of domestic brands. Still, domestic brands have reacted quickly, and they have been able to latch onto market trends such as using technology, new refined oil products, and derivative products.
Herbalist, for example, has opened skincare spas in Shanghai, while other brands, including InnoHerb and Dr. Plant, have started to work with universities to ensure their investments in ingredients research will bear fruit. Chen Tong, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Meanwhile, makeup consumption is also rapidly growing among men who have become a major target for some cosmetics brands. Let's take a closer look at the new trend.
As founder of men's makeup company Warpaint, Daniel Gray's business journey has been a very personal one. After being bullied at school, he says he used his sister's makeup to raise his confidence. It was the basis for launching Warpaint in November last year.
As you see, quite a nice little glass jar, like a concealer which you can use to cover up blemishes, under eye wrinkles, darkness.
And Daniel says the response has taken him by surprise.
It's been an absolutely amazing journey for us, and we've been going 7 months, and we run out of product after 2 months when our forecasted for a year's worth of product. So I think that just shows you the demand that there is for this market now.
Warpaint says it's seen a 36% month-on-month growth in sales, and it's not alone. At this professional makeup store in London, other homegrown brands like Gentleman's Polish that are targeted specifically at men are taking up more shelf space.
I don't think a man wants to walk up to a women's department store in a women's section and possibly buy a product that's always been targeted to women.
One factor that's propelled men's beauty into the mainstream is social media. Bloggers like UK-based Jake Jamie share their tips with hundreds of thousands of followers online. It's a trend that's particularly relevant with young people who've grown up in a digital world, and it's a global phenomenon too. From Asia to the US, influencers like Patrick Starr have millions of people following their take on beauty.
According to Euromonitor, the men's grooming market here in the UK was worth almost $2.2 billion last year, up slightly on the previous 12 months. For beauty companies that are looking for new areas of growth, men are becoming increasingly important consumers. As more of us here take an interest in how we look, global and local brands are responding with products.
According to research company YouGov, around 1 in 20 UK men now wear makeup regularly, with around 1% wearing it every day. We decided to put that theory to the test with a group of office workers in London.
So guys, what do you think about makeup then? Dan, let's start with you. Would you consider wearing makeup or
I
not?
don't think I've ever considered wearing any makeup whatsoever, but I mean, I wouldn't think it's such a bad thing neither. So, you know.
Yuris, how about you?
Well, the thing about makeup, I don't think of wearing makeup as in like a woman would wear makeup. I imagine it more like if it was in a moisturizer, if you could hide like concealer or something like that, something that doesn't feel like I'm putting a lipstick or eyeshadow.
Yeah, personally, I'm definitely trying to cling on to my look of 5, 10, even 15 years ago. And if this stuff can help me do that, then that would be a reason to consider using it.
It may have once been a taboo subject, but it seems social norms around men wearing makeup are easing in the UK and worldwide, with the multi-billion-dollar cosmetics industry still dominated by female customers. The growth potential for the men's market is huge, which means sites like this may be more common in the future. Nui Jabakil for CCTV.
All right, let's look at the commodities market, and gold is to a one-week low today, consolidating below $1,400 as the dollar rallied on expectations of a less dovish U.S. Federal Reserve ahead of testimony from the chair of the central bank. You're watching Global Business, still ahead. Nigeria seeks to increase exports to the U.S. under the AGOA trade deal.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
"19 years after the United States established the African Growth and Opportunity Act, Nigeria is still struggling to take advantage of the trade-boosting initiative. AGOA offers a duty-free access to the U.S. market for thousands of categories of goods, but Nigeria's relied on oil. The country wants to boost exports before the current AGOA program runs out in 2025. Vili Haza tells us more.
25-year-old shoemaker and designer Doris Davis is hoping to extend her business into global markets within the next 5 years.
Okay, I've been into leatherworks and footworks for 2 years now, and so far it's been profitable and expanding. My dream is to actually build a fashion house where I can display my creative work and to make quality footwear and accessories that can fit the international markets.
Merchants like David's could export goods to the U.S. market without having to pay duties into the U.S. market under the African Growth and Opportunity Act. But since the program was launched in the year 2000, Nigeria has not taken advantage.
I think we need to do something regarding, again, the framework of what we export, so that if we have a body that will pre-test what is leaving our shores in terms of cashew, in terms of cocoa, in terms of rubber, and so on, those products that will form input for manufacturing sector in the U.S., in this case, then we can say that, yes, we will get there.
Nigeria's largest export to the U.S. is crude oil, but because prices of the commodity have been historically low, Nigeria has suffered from its lack of trade diversity. So the government is encouraging more investment in agriculture and manufacturing, and AGOA can support those goals.
There will be expansion in exports, there will be more job creation, there will also be more income for people. American has more than double of Nigerian population. So for such population, if you are looking at that with Nigerian population, you are sure you have more than 500 million population market you want to produce for. So you are not just farming for Nigeria, you are not just producing or manufacturing for Nigeria, you are having American in mind.
There are 6 years left for African countries to export goods like these to the United States duty-free. Local manufacturers like Doris hope the government will support them so their goods can go beyond the shores of this country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja, Nigeria.
Globally, wine tasting involves savoring the constant range of flavors, aromas, and general characteristics of wine. In Paris, the element of spitting is also necessary, despite it being against the norm in modern society. Here's CGTN's Terry Wangari with the details on why spitting is essential in the wine tasting process.
In a typical society, spitting is considered uncouth unless wine tasting is involved. In Paris, savoring involves a good whiff before tasting the wine.
The important thing is to take a bit of wine in your mouth and then take it to the front and then make a net, and there you go. Put your tongue a bit in. It's not very pretty what I do, but I can't help it. That's how it is. Doing this gesture and then a little spit, very delicate.
Spitting is not disgusting. On the contrary, spitting makes you even more classy in the society, and that's the difference. If you spit your wine, you understand in front of others and in front of yourself that we are savoring and appreciating more, and even better than others, because you don't get the effects of alcohol.
The taster often makes a duck face to allow a bit of air to detect further characteristics, a step called groomage. For professionals, tasting wine means assessing its appearance or robe, its interaction with air, its aromas, and finally its taste.
Yesterday we had a very big night. In the evening, we spat around 24 bottles. There were 24 people, so we could not have drunk and savored them by digesting them.
The first step is identifying the wine's basic quality. Spitting the wine out is intrinsic to a tasting. However, some object to the sight of good wine seemingly going to waste. In France, 7,000 oenologists define spitting as an ordinary act. Notably, a professional taster can assess as many as 100 wines on a daily basis.
You'll see that everyone spits. It's not complicated anyway. If you're going to taste several wines and you don't spit them out, you don't make the most of them at the end of the tasting.
The world of wine has a poetic vocabulary, much of it borrowed from the perfume industry to describe mild sensations. Consumer groups are now demanding that more information be included on a wine's label to provide data on calories and ingredients. However, no label can reflect a wine's taste because the wine is a creation. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
A quick look at the currencies now. And South Africa's rand steadied against the dollar today, struggling for momentum as investors awaited clues on U.S. monetary policy from the Federal Reserve officials and domestic data. The Kenyan shilling firmed against the dollar, supported by inflows from non-governmental organizations and offshore investors buying treasury bills and bonds. And with that, we come to the end of Global Business today. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platform. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for your company.